Hello everyone, I'm back with another video for you today. I have another Scuffed meta snapshot for Shadowverse to share with you, and let's just jump right into it. So the first S-tier deck that I've got for you is Runecraft, Hybrid Runecraft, a bit of spell boost and a bit of earth synergy, earth sigils with things like Witch's Brew, of course, the Adoring Witch, which also gives you a Witch's Brew. These are very good for cycling through the deck, building up those earth rights, the earth sigils that we can then use in conjunction with the Norman, which is a very, very powerful play, allowing you to heal yourself up, deal with aggro decks. Also, the Guardian with Barrier is a very solid option. You get a 3/3 with Ward and Barrier. Very annoying, very strong, especially if you play this on curve. So that's a real threat. An additional tool for the spell boost deck to be using. We've of course got Anangria, but we've also got Burgent, which is the onion patch card that allows us to get a bunch of 1/1s with spell boost on strike. So that's very strong, allows you to get your declimb out very consistently. We've also got other tools in there. You've got the Flames of Chaos, the new card, William to deal with the wide boards. Some people are running Lilanthem as a one-of in this deck, in the hybrid deck. I don't know if that's completely correct, but this is another threat. If you've developed some earth rights and have some sticking around in the late game, then this will just continually revive itself and become a bit of a problem for the opponent. I'm not a huge fan of the card, but I've heard it's quite good in the mirror match to have a bit of a sticky board that is difficult perhaps for the opponent to deal with, and in certain matchups to have a bit of inevitability and kill the opponent if you don't have your Cocytus decline combo. But that's an optional card, you don't have to play that. The rest of the deck is very, very solid. Definitely an S-tier deck. You're just sort of controlling the game. Yes, aggro can be a little bit of a problem for this deck sometimes, but you do have a lot of healing, so if you're able to survive the initial onslaught, then you're typically going to be very okay. So this is probably the best deck in the game, I would say, with or without the Lilanthem. Let's go to the next. The next S-tier deck in my mind is going to be Swordcraft, Midrange Swordcraft. Very, very powerful. A lot of new tools in the new set. A little bit surprising because I figure if Runecraft is so good, then Swordcraft probably not going to be S-tier, but I think it is actually. The pure power level of the deck is quite obscene. You've got the Gildaria, the new card, which automatically super evolves in the late game and can basically clear, pretty much any board quite effectively, summoning these, knights, the 2/2s, which can rush in and kill everything. So that card's a standout, allows you to grind down opponents, but also Odin in pretty much, in a lot of decks in this meta snapshot, to be honest. This card is ridiculous. The Storm, the Banish effect, you can super evolve this to put the opponent into lethal range a lot of times with your Albert as a follow-up. You've got the Grimnir in there to synergize with Galdaria. You've got Prim as well, which is a very powerful card if you're going second, because you can coin out the Prim, turn 2, drop a 3/3 with Ward and Bane, which is just obscene and can lead to a lot of chip damage on the opponent, which then you translate to a kill with Odin plus Albert. So you've got those tools. You've also, of course, just got all the really nutty power plays that that Swordcraft has had already. The Amalia, the Amelia into Magus combo. You could consider running Geno in the deck as well. I think the card's not quite as good as it was in prior patches, but that is an option instead of Olivia, for example. I think Olivia's quite nice because it allows you to sometimes push face damage with the Super Evo. So yeah, this deck's very, very strong in my opinion. Also a good S-tier deck. The next deck we have, which I'm not sure if it is actually S-tier, it might be more worthy of A-tier, but it is Artifact Portalcraft. I've got a catapult version here. I did a video on a non-catapult version on my channel as well, but a very solid deck. Portalcraft, you have pretty good matchup into the Swordcraft, I think, and decent enough into Runecraft. I think that therefore makes the deck worthy of S-tier. You also have a pretty good matchup into aggro because you can heal up, but you have a lot of aggressive options in this deck. You're running the Odin again, Orcus as well as finishers, and you can play the catapult. You can copy the beta artifacts to go face if you want to, deal a lot of damage. In certain matchups, you're going to prefer to take the healing option and buff that up, with the Carnelia, make it so it cannot be destroyed by the catapult and the Doomrite. And you can evolve this, of course, and be able to put that ward with healing down on the board. Very good. The Lovestruck Puppeteer for the early game, quite strong as well. And Karula, the new card, which is a real threat. You can super evolve it to deal some face damage as well, and essentially another Alouette in the deck, which allows you to get a lot of these artifacts out, spamming the opponent and dealing with what they're doing. So this deck's a pretty solid one as well. I think another contender for S tier. Okay, now we're into the A tier. So these are pretty solid decks, but not the very, very best, I would say, in terms of the win rate you're going to be able to have with them. This is Midrange Abyss, we can call it. So you're essentially playing some pretty strong early game. You're trying to get a sticky zombie on the board, perhaps with the Ghastly Sorry. Deal some chip damage to the face if you can, otherwise control the board. Play the, you've got Aggro and this kind of thing. Perhaps Shadow Crypt should be a 3 of, I'm not 100% sure on that. That's something you can consider. But yeah, we've got strong power play with the Charon, and this can, of course, reanimate both the skeletons from the Minnow and, a 2-drop. You can also super evolve it in some situations to bring back, maybe a Vuela, but that's probably less likely to be happening. You just want to evolve, normal evolve a 2-drop. For example, a fill or a fill down can be quite strong with this power play, and you've then got Undead Soldier on 6 to get the sticky zombies again on the board, make it difficult for the opponent to deal with your board, and then hopefully do some face damage and set up for the potential Cerberus finisher, allowing you to buff up the units you have on board, deal some pretty significant damage. If the opponent survives, you've then got Odin as well to continue the pressure. We've also got later game cards such as Gin, Setsu, and Medusa to be able to deal with what the opponent's doing, and perhaps play a bit more defensively if we need to do that against things like Forestcraft or Aggro Abyss, stuff like that, where we cannot necessarily kill them and we prefer to play a bit more defensively. There are some matchups where the Olivia and these kind of tools can help you heal up and help you survive. So quite a flexible deck. I don't think it's the very best. It has some tougher matchups with Swordcraft can be a little bit difficult. For example, the Runecraft as well is not the best matchup. So those sort of S tier decks are a bit of a trouble for this deck, but against everything else, I think you do have a pretty decent experience, a pretty decent time. But yeah, maybe not the very best deck, but it's an option. Staying with the Abysscraft theme, you'll not be surprised to see Aggro Abysscraft also in A tier. This deck was quite popular for a while on the ladder, maybe still is because you can grind games very fast with it. It's probably not the very best because you have some tough matchups when they are able to ward up and heal themselves and this kind of thing. That can be very difficult for you, but you do get to play very fast games just by spamming out the 1-drops, getting those bats and those ghosts into your hand. You've got this very powerful 2-drop 3/3, which you can, some people choose to combo this with Charon because it can bring this back and you can then evolve it to get your health back. I'm not sure if that's correct. I think it's better to just go face, play the 2-drops, play the 3-drop as well. And then you've got Excella as the sort of finisher for the deck for the most part. You're using this with the Crypt to be able to, get a bunch of units on the board. Perhaps with Vuela, Excella, that's sort of a combo you can do on turn 7. She can give +2 on the Super Evolve, and the Excella, of course, just goes face for a bunch of damage. So you can go this, plus this, plus this, maybe with a Ghost as well on turn 8 even. And that's a very, very strong finisher, deals a lot of damage. Odin, of course, in every bloody deck, because the card is just... So yeah, Aggro Abyss, a very solid one, and what a lot of people are using to climb huge amounts of points on the Master ladder. Okay, next A tier deck I have here is Roach Forestcraft, a pretty solid option, although of course a bit of a mind-melting combo deck, which you have to calculate the lethals with the Roach, of course. Some people are running Lemaga. I've been not running it recently, personally. I've been running just one of Olivia and playing a 2-drop instead of Lemaga, but the decks will vary slightly on the exact, legendaries and what cards you want to run there. Some people even cut Glade, but I don't think that's correct. To run like Fairy Tamer and things like this. But Roach, very good option. You've got, of course, Titania now, which helps you to get juice into the hand and keep your fairies rolling. You also have an option to deal with Wilbert and maybe deal with Cerberus with the Titania Evolve ability. And we have Garden's Allure, which is actually a really good card. I underrated this heavily because you can fuse all of your bad cards into this and a lot of the time just keep this in your hand as a way to make the Godwood Staff plus Titania combo more flexible, more usable. Use your Glades efficiently and not overdraw, essentially. So very good card. Also the backup, of course, of drawing 2 cards sometimes if you need to find more juice, if you've run out of good stuff. And yeah, this deck's just very strong. You're able to... The early game is like a little bit weak because we're not running the Godwood Fairy anymore, the 1/1 and Fairy Tamer and stuff, so The early game can be a bit awkward. You need convocation, you need to deal with their things with ambush from above and things like this. So sometimes early games are a bit scary, but once you get past the early game, Godwood Staff on the board. This also does get hit by Odin sometimes, which kind of sucks, but it's a Roach deck. It does the Roach things. It kills opponents. It's good into Runecraft, which is a popular deck. So yeah, not a bad one. Okay, another A tier deck I have here is Puppets. I think they are pretty decent. They just have a lot of damage. Again, with Odin, it's kind of like having another Orcus in the deck because you can deal another face, 7 face damage with a Super Evo. And that puts opponents, quite easily into lethal range a lot of the time. If you have a strong early game, which you do with this deck, with a lot of 2-drops, answering their units, with the Puppeteer and things like this, you can really snowball the game, play a couple of 2s, hit face, play the UD, hit the face, play the Noah, get the puppets buffed up, and then of course hit them with the Orcuses and the Odins. It's a nasty deck. I don't think they even run Liam anymore because it's too high mana. We just prefer to bash the opponent over and over again in the early game. We can use an Evo or 2 if we need to deal face damage as well, and then we can finish them off with these very powerful go face cards. So I think this is a pretty strong aggro option actually because it deals well with aggro decks. It can put people on the clock and kill them quite quickly if they're not careful. The one drawback of this deck, I think, is it's maybe a little bit inconsistent because, well, to be fair, you only really need to draw an Odin and an Orcus, and you typically are killing the opponent. So, yeah, not a bad option, I think, A-tier deck. Next, I have Aggro Swordcraft, which is, again, perhaps good for climbing the ladder quickly. A much more face-focused version of Swordcraft compared to the previous one, which was more focused on sort of those mid-game, boards and dealing with what the opponent's doing, grinding them out with Amelia and such, and Amelia. This deck, a bit more fast-paced. It might even want to run 2 of Amelia instead of Luminous Magus. I'm not sure about that, but you've got the Quick Blade for turn 1, of course, go face, and then you're trying to overwhelm the opponent, perhaps with the Prim combo. That can be an option. I'm not even sure if it's actually correct in this deck necessarily because it's a little bit slow to get those units on the board, but it is an ambush, allows you to chip the face damage, so something to think about if you want to further optimize the deck. But we've got Zirconia, of course, that's your main play. Into the, Rose can be pretty nice as well, in order to deal with what the opponent's got going on, flood the board with units a little bit, and then really we're just trying to play an Albert a lot of the time on 5, go face with it, and then follow up with, of course, Odin and Centaur Centurion and the Tentacles, and yeah, just kill the other guy, deal face damage, hope that it's going to be okay, don't worry, Valse on turn 6 if you need. It's a good deck, it's a very decent deck. You have a lot of tools to be very annoying and go face and deal a lot of damage. It might even want to play 3 Hound for a nice 3-drop, aggressive, scary card that the opponent has to deal with. Anyway, I'll let you figure the aggro decks out. That's not my forte, per se. But yeah, let's go to the next deck. Another A-tier deck, Runecraft Earth Sigil version. I think this is very strong, but since you're not running Declimb and you're not running Cocytus in this deck, it's a little bit more fair than the hybrid version, I think. You do have very, very powerful plays and a very strong curve with this deck. You can play your 2-drops, so you have a very good early game with all of these Earth Sigil 2s, and of course you then can go Enchanting Perfumer, quite often coining this out to deal damage, deal with what the opponent's doing, or an Edelweiss as well, also very, very powerful as coined out play. So typically you go 2-drop into 4, into 4-drop, into a 5, probably Anangria. Sometimes you can play Juno as well, which is an interesting play, allows you to get golems, continually onto the board, quite annoying for the opponent to deal with. Then we've got Norman on 6, and then we've got Odin on 7, and then you often will play Lilanthim to be able to, have a sticky board that the opponent then has to deal with. If they don't, they're pretty much dead, because you can hit face with this, follow up with an Odin or a Quan. We don't have to play Odin on 7, we also got Quan on 7, which is just, of course, very, very powerful, presents a wide board, deals 5 face damage. So this is sort of a more aggressive, deck compared to the hybrid spell boost version. I've got it in A tier because I think in the mirror match it struggles. If you're against spell boost rune with the declimb and whatnot, I think it's going to struggle. And I think lacking the Cocytus is just a real downside, because decks that go quite slow, like perhaps the Abyss Crafts or Ramp Dragon, things like this, give you a bit more of a difficult time than with normal Runecraft. But very solid deck, and certainly deals with aggressive decks very well with all of these powerful early game plays. Okay, moving into the B tier now. I have Ward Havencraft in the B tier. Now, this is a pretty solid deck, to be honest. Don't get me wrong. It's in B tier, but I think you can win quite a bit with it, especially if your ladder environment is a lot of aggro decks. Havencraft really does do well into the more aggressive things. You've got the Salifa to heal up, damage their board, destroy everything, and then, you know, you're just spamming wards with this deck. You really are. The Wilbert, of course, very strong card, summoning the 2/4s once you've evolved him, and buffing up all of your wards into the future. Now, he does get hit by Odin, and pretty much every good deck these days is running Odin, so that's a real drawback, and I think that's why this deck falls into the B tier, and it's not so popular anymore as it was at the beginning. There are different versions of this that you can run. A lot of people like to run the, the Griffin, as well as an artifact package with the 2-drop artifact and things like this. I prefer a version like this, to be honest, but that's up to you to experiment with and play around with. Of course, either summoning those, warded cards, and then you're able to Gian on the turn 8 after, hopefully, to overwhelm the opponent. Certainly can get some things done. I think it has a pretty terrible matchup, though, into Runecraft and into Swordcraft. And, not too bad into Portalcraft. That's, a somewhat playable matchup, I think. But, there's difficulties all over the place. But yeah, you're going to be good into the aggro decks, so that's sort of the main upside of this deck. But quite interesting that it's fallen so far. Allows Roach to be more playable as well. I think that this deck is not quite as strong. Okay, let's go to the next. In the B tier, I have a Aggro Dragon deck. An Aggro Dragon deck. They got some tools along with everyone else. They've got now Odin, of course. Every deck has Odin. So if you aren't able to, completely pressure the opponent down as you would be in the past with, the Forte and stuff, you at least have the Odin to get through wards and deal a lot of face damage. So this deck does put out a huge amount of power, of face aggression with the Otohime, of course. Every turn, just go face, evolve, deal damage, buff up if we can, a little bit deal with the opponent's board, although that's not your strong point. The Blade is a new addition to the deck with the expansion, which is quite powerful because you can have another artifact that you're able to get on the board and continually deal a bit of damage with this. So that helps the deck get to those, lethal points, certainly. And of course, we still have Forte, so we can do disgusting things with Forte, we can do disgusting things with the Odin now as well. It's not a bad deck. I think it's in B tier because it's not quite as strong as the other aggro decks, but it is an option if you want to play Dragon aggro for some reason, if you're that kind of guy. I don't know. Maybe that's you. I think in the B tier, I also have to put Dragon Ramp. Now, I quite like this deck. I had some success with it briefly when there was not much aggro on the ladder and I was facing a lot of control decks and slower sort of Abysscraft and things like this. I was able to get quite the win streak going with Ramp Dragon, so there's potential here. It is a very strong deck. You're doing things like Fenny to halve the cost of everything. You've got Genesis Dragon as a finisher, and you're able to play these mermen out early game to summon the 2/2s with Rush, deal with what the opponent's doing. Very, very decent. Neptune as well heals you up a lot. You can super evolve her for 4 healing and get the crest, which allows you to continually heal, which is very solid. And of course, just a ramp deck, so you can high roll, Dragon Sign, Draconic Strike, as well, to then be able to reduce the penny and go crazy. And when it works, it feels amazing playing this deck, but it is quite inconsistent, and a lot of the time you don't really have enough early game if you're playing a Dragon Sign to be able to withstand the pressure of a lot of decks. The Puppet deck, the aggro decks. There's just a lot of stuff that's just going to bash you up, and even against your good matchups such as Swordcraft and Portal Artifact, which are in theory pretty good matchups, in reality, they still can win if they draw well and draw, face damage and just hit you and you don't quite get what you need. So even the good matchups you are fairly inconsistent in. But yeah, quite a fun deck, and I think if you are able to high roll, it's very strong. Now, moving into the C tier, I don't think this deck's very good. This is sort of a mid-range Forestcraft, which I've seen people playing. You can try this, but again, I don't think it's the best. You have bad matchups into sort of the top decks, and that's typically going to mean you're quite a weak deck, but also not even good into perhaps, I mean, a lot of the aggro decks I think you can deal with reasonably, but I think just being so bad into the top end of the meta is making this deck not worthy of even a B tier, to be honest. I mean, it could be a B tier, but I'm putting it in the C to have a bit more range of decks here. So, but the idea is you're just playing a lot of fairies, trying to get the board developed, play the Fae maybe, buff the board up, play the Cynthia, buff the board up, you know, draw if you need to with Garden's Allure, but really get some fairies with Titania, and hope you're going to be able to, you know, play one Glade perhaps, draw some cards, Aria, get those fairies hitting the face, and then just try to kill the opponent with the damage from Odin, the damage from fairies, plus Roach in the late game to the face. You're not bouncing Roach, you're not doing anything too crazy with the Roach. It's just there as a bit of final damage with the Super Evolve to get you across the finish line. That's the idea anyway with this deck. And yeah, you could try it, see if you have success, but I think it's probably a C tier deck. And the final C tier deck, the final deck I have for you is a Stormcraft. This might be better than C tier. I haven't really experimented with it. Haven't seen it much on ladder either. But you're playing the artifacts out, of course, we're playing the birds. And we do have some new tools, such as the Agnes, which has Storm and can potentially destroy an enemy follower. It can be quite strong, potentially. You do need to develop the artifacts, though, which is sort of the tricky part. And we don't have that much steam if we don't play a Serene Sanctuary. Potentially it might be hard to find what we need. I think you go 3 Featherfall and you just play like a bunch of Storm and you really just hit the face. I don't think you even play the Ron in the deck anymore. You just go face as much as possible. You know, you do have Salifa and things to maybe deal with the aggro decks and whatnot. This card's quite interesting as well as an option to deal with Wilbert and other ward cards and things like this, helping you push face damage. So there's some tricks here, and I think, you know, with the Odin, you can never count a deck like this out. Just go face. If you get Manus early game, I've been completely crushed by this deck because this can deal like 4 damage at the start, then you maybe start throwing in the Storm Falcons for another 4 damage, then one of these for 4 damage, and, you know, you're very quickly dying against this. So it might be better than C tier, but I haven't seen it enough to really give a full opinion on that. But yeah, so that was the entire tier list, guys. The meta snapshot. I hope that's helpful for you. It will give you an idea of what you're facing when you queue into a certain deck on the ladder, and potentially give you an option here for something you might be able to play or work towards crafting, so you can have a strong deck and win a lot of games. But with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe as always for more videos. Hope I'll see you next time. Bye bye.